Imagine the camera gliding over a desert quarry at dawn. The light is soft, the air is still, and then the frame fills with it. A single, colossal stone. This is the unfinished obelisk at Aswan, still locked to the bedrock. Nearly 1,200 tons of granite. That is the weight of more than 600 average cars, or a line of modern battle tanks laid end to end. One piece, one block, meant to be cut free, raised, moved and set upright with perfect balance. Or picture the megaliths at Baalbek in Lebanon. Some of those stones weigh over 1,000 tons each. They sit stacked in a terrace wall, as if placed there by a giant hand. Did you know there is no off-the-shelf crane in common use today that can simply roll up and lift a 1,000 ton block into place? On modern construction sites, we break things into smaller, manageable pieces. We avoid this kind of mass. So here is the first mystery. If we hesitate, in the age of steel, hydraulics, and computer modeling, how did people with copper chisels and wooden sledges move these stones at all? How do you drag 1,000 tons uphill? How do you set it down so precisely that it still sits there thousands of years later without cracking? Most of us grew up hearing a simple story. Ramps, ropes, slaves, or workers pulling in the heat of the sun. Decades of brute force. But what really happened when these blocks were quarried, transported, and locked into place with millimeter accuracy? Why are we more confident in the story than the physical evidence allows? Look closer at the stone itself. On granite in Egypt, we find drill cores with spiral grooves, as if something spun through the rock at high speed. Casing stones at the Great Pyramid fit so tightly that a razor blade cannot slip between them. At Baalbek, the joins between blocks are so clean that rainwater barely finds a path. This is not just heavy lifting. This is precision work that behaves almost like machine engineering. Old legends tell a different story from the school textbooks. According to the stories, temples and pyramids were not only monuments, but living schools where pharaohs and priests learned the secrets of vibration, sound, and a journey beyond death. What if the visible ramps and sledges were only the outer rituals of a hidden operating system, a way of using stone, sound, and consciousness together? What kind of knowledge could turn a quarry into a classroom and a construction site into a mystery school? Most importantly, if such an operating system once existed, where did it go? And can any trace of it still be read in the stones themselves? We'll find out together as we step past the familiar story of brute force and enter a labyrinth of evidence, legend, and impossible engineering that may point to a forgotten technology of the pharaohs. Welcome back to the channel. Here, we explore the mysteries and forgotten lore of ancient Egypt, slowly and calmly, so you can relax, unwind, and drift off while learning about one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history. From the pyramids and hidden chambers beneath the sands to the gods, pharaohs, and ancient stories carved into temple walls along the Nile. If you enjoy relaxing history like this, consider subscribing and joining us for more journeys into the ancient world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's return to the sands of Egypt. What if the pyramids are manuals, not monuments? So what if the pyramids themselves are the manual, not just the final project, but the textbook, the lab, and the exam, all carved into stone? What if every angle, every passage, every hidden chamber is a line of code in a language we no longer remember how to read? Did you know that for thousands of years, visitors have called these places houses of eternity and books in stone? Old legends tell a different story than simple tombs. They hint that the temples and pyramids were mystery schools, where pharaohs and priests trained not only for the afterlife, but for mastery of unseen forces. So what happens if we take those legends seriously? Imagine if temples were not only places of worship, but machines tuned to invisible currents. A hall of columns becomes a resonance chamber. A narrow shaft becomes a waveguide for sound or starlight. A staircase through the heart of a pyramid becomes a ritual path, a controlled journey through darkness, pressure, and vibration. What if stone itself was a living record, storing the memory of the tools, frequencies, and rituals that shaped it? According to the stories, the highest priests guarded forbidden knowledge, not just myths about gods, but precise techniques, how to move through the duat, how to separate and reunite the subtle bodies, how to use sound and geometry to change the state of matter and of consciousness. That knowledge was not written plainly. It was encoded in architecture, in processions around the walls, in initiation rites that used fear, silence, and pitch-black chambers as teaching tools. This episode of Mystery Schools of Egypt is one chapter in that larger journey. We are entering a curriculum, not just a ruin. We will walk the same axes that initiates may have walked, from the outer courtyards to the inner sanctuaries, from the bright causeways to the underground chambers where the living rehearsed their own death. But what really happened when they moved those impossible stones? To approach that, we have to set clear expectations. We will start with the mainstream picture: ramps, sledges, levers, teams of workers pouring water on sand. We will look at what archaeology can show, from quarry marks at Aswan to tool traces on granite. Then we will step into the shadow corridors. We will ask whether resonance, sacred geometry, and initiation rituals were part of the same operating system. Was moving stone also moving consciousness? Were the heaviest blocks, the most precise joins, reserved for places where only initiates could go? Most importantly, we will draw a line between what can be measured and what can only be inferred. When we talk about acoustic hotspots in the king's chamber, that is data. When we connect those frequencies to altered states and underworld training, that is a hypothesis. Some ideas in this journey will be speculative. They have to be. So as we move forward, treat this not as a sermon, but as an investigation. The stones have not changed. The question is whether we can learn to read them again. We'll find out together as we test each claim, weigh each mystery, and decide what kind of knowledge might still be hidden in the manuals of the pharaohs. From tombs to temples of transformation. So before we chase lost technologies, we need to step back and ask a quieter question. How does the official story describe these stones? According to mainstream Egyptology, the tale begins in the Old Kingdom, around 2600 BCE. The Great Pyramids at Giza are presented as royal tombs, monumental graves for pharaohs who were seen as living gods. Later, across the New Kingdom and beyond, the focus shifts south along the Nile. Sprawling temple complexes like Karnak and Luxor rise as houses of the gods, built and rebuilt for thousands of years by kings, priests, and organized labor. In this view, there is no mystery school, only a powerful state. Teams of skilled workers and seasonal farmers, not slaves, are fed, housed, and taxed to move stone on a scale the world had never seen. Quarries at Aswan yield hard red granite. Tura, near Cairo, provides gleaming white limestone for smooth pyramid casings. Between quarry and site, the method is simple on paper: mud brick and rubble ramps, wooden sledges, ropes, levers, and a lot of muscle. Did you know there is even an experiment where wetting the sand in front of a sledge cuts friction nearly in half? In the textbooks, this becomes the key visual. Long lines of workers hauling blocks over damp desert sand, while overseers clap and shout the rhythm. Ramps curl up the pyramid's flanks or snake in massive straight runs. At the top, gangs of men lever each stone into place, one after another, year after year. It is a powerful image. It explains a lot. But what really happened inside these monuments once the stones were set? Were they only silent tombs and ritual stages for offerings? Or were they something closer to architectural textbooks, written in granite and light? Old legends tell a different story. Greek visitors, like Herodotus, speak of Egyptian wisdom that stretched back into a forgotten age. Clement of Alexandria later mentions 42 sacred books, a priestly curriculum of philosophy, astronomy, medicine, and rituals. Arab chroniclers describe hidden books sealed beneath the pyramids before a great flood. Local tales whisper of priests who could speak to stone, command it with names and words of power, as if matter itself could hear. According to the stories, the pyramids and temples were not just graves and shrines, but schools, initiation chambers, carefully tuned corridors where pharaohs and chosen initiates rehearsed the afterlife, learning to navigate the duat, the Egyptian underworld of gates, guardians, and judgment. In this reframing, the Great Pyramid is less a coffin and more a script, a journey from darkness to light, from compression to expansion, from death to rebirth. Most importantly, that changes how we look at the building process itself. If these were temples of transformation, then moving and shaping stone may have been part of the training. Imagine a curriculum where lifting a block was also a ritual, where every hall, every chant, every vibration taught initiates how consciousness interacts with matter. If that was true, who was allowed to learn it? And how far did that knowledge really go? The closed doors of the stone schools. If lifting a block was also a ritual, then not everyone was invited to lift it. Behind the public temples and open courtyards, Egypt kept its most dangerous lessons behind closed doors. Did you know that the grandest monuments of stone may have been built by knowledge that only a few dozen people in the entire kingdom were ever allowed to hear? At the top were the pharaohs, walking the earth as living gods, heirs to Ra in the day and Osiris in the night. Around them stood the high priests of Ptah at Memphis, of Thoth at Hermopolis, of Osiris at Abydos. A thin, guarded ring of minds trained in the deepest mysteries. Below them, a narrow circle of initiates and temple scribes passed through years of testing, before they were even allowed near the inner chambers. Old legends tell a different story than crowded schools. They speak of a curriculum whispered in darkness, passed from mouth to ear, never written on public walls. Now contrast that with everyday Egypt. For thousands of years, most people woke with the sun, worked the fields, carved statues, baked bread, and brought offerings to the outer courts. Farmers saw the gleaming pylons. Artisans decorated columns with bright paint. Even ordinary temple staff prepared incense and carried offerings. But when the last torches in the courtyard were put out, when the doors of the sanctuary closed, they went home. They never saw the midnight rituals in sealed chambers, or the scrolls locked in stone shrines that no common eye would ever read. Inside those stone schools, the goal was not just to serve the gods, it was to master the passage through death itself. The priests taught that the duat was a labyrinth of gates, guardians, and trials, and that the soul needed precise words, tones, and names to survive. In elevated chants, they rehearsed how to keep the heart light, how to stabilize the car and guide the bar, how to ignite the ak so it could shine like a star. What kind of knowledge claims that a single mispronounced word can unmake a soul? Imagine standing where an initiate once stood. You are deep in a torchlit corridor, the air heavy and still, the ceiling pressing down in endless stone. From far within the temple, you hear a low, pulsing chant, voices rising and falling in a rhythm that seems to vibrate in your bones. The walls sweat with resin and incense. A stone door closes behind you with a final echoing thud. You know that one wrong word in the ritual ahead could mean spiritual annihilation in the afterlife. Not a punishment in time, but a falling out of existence. According to the stories, this is why secrecy was absolute. Most importantly, the same silence that protected the soul's journey may have hidden advanced ways of working with stone itself. If certain chants, rhythms, or resonances could influence the body, could they also influence matter? Were the temples tuned not only to stars, but to frequencies that could move or soften stone? But what really happened when the last true priests died, their schools shattered, their scrolls burned or buried? Did a whole branch of spiritual engineering vanish with them? We'll find out together as we follow the trail those priests left behind. Not in surviving books, but in the stone itself, a lost library beneath the sand. To follow that trail, we have to leave the broken ramps and fallen stones for a moment and step into a different kind of ruin, a lost library beneath the sand. Did you know that long after the last pyramid was built, Egyptian priests were still whispering about books that came from an age before the pharaohs themselves? One of those priests was Manetho, writing in Greek in the 3rd century BCE. He lived more than 2,000 years after the Great Pyramid, yet he spoke of king lists stretching back into a misty time of gods and demigods. According to the stories, he did not invent this out of thin air. He claimed to be drawing on temple archives, on records guarded in sanctuaries that ordinary people never saw. Greek writers like Plutarch and Diodorus Siculus repeat the same pattern. They describe Egyptian priests as keepers of secret teachings, educated in sacred schools attached to the great temples. Diodorus mentions that the most learned among them were trained from childhood, initiated step by step into rituals, astronomy, and what we would now call natural science. Yet even they hinted that their knowledge was only a fragment of something older. For thousands of years, visitors wrote about astonishing libraries hidden inside temple complexes. Old legends tell a different story than the image of isolated scrolls. They speak of tens of thousands of papyri stored in chambers at Heliopolis, Memphis, and Thebes. Clement of Alexandria later echoes this with his list of 42 sacred books of the Egyptians, said to contain everything from hymns and laws to geometry, medicine, and the rituals of the afterlife. Most importantly, many of these texts were attributed not to human authors, but to divine or semi-divine figures like Thoth, the god of writing, and Imhotep, the architect sage. What kind of knowledge did a culture place in the hands of a god? Hymns and myths, yes, but also precise sequences of words, gestures, and measurements that were treated as technical operations. We catch a glimpse of this in the Shabaka stone, a basalt slab from the 25th dynasty. Its inscription claims to preserve an older, worm-eaten papyrus, already ancient when the Kushite pharaoh Shabaka ordered it recarved in stone. On it, creation itself unfolds through the heart and tongue of Ptah. The world is shaped by thought and spoken sound. In other temple inscriptions, gods speak forms into being, and reality arranges itself around their voice. But what really happened inside those libraries and hidden chambers? If creation could be engineered by sound, could stone be guided the same way? Imagine scrolls that did not just describe the gods, but encoded rituals, geometries, and sequences of chant used in temple work. The timing of drums, the pitch of voices, the layout of halls, forming a kind of spiritual engineering manual. If even the ancients believed they were living in the shadow of a greater, older technology of the gods, what exactly had been lost? And can we still read its fingerprints in the stone itself, in cuts, joints, and resonant chambers that behave as though they remember instructions no book now records? We'll find out together as we return to the quarries and the heaviest blocks of all. Fingerprints in granite, when stone behaves like metal. To read those fingerprints, we have to go back to the stone itself, not the legends carved on it, but the scars and polish marks that look less like primitive labor and more like the memory of a precise, technical ritual. Imagine standing in the Aswan quarry in front of the unfinished obelisk, a single piece of granite, nearly 1,200 tons, still fused to the bedrock. Its sides are straight, its base neatly undercut, as if someone was halfway through sliding a colossal key out of the earth. We can see the trenches around it, the clean quarry lines, the careful separation. But what really happened after this stage in other projects? What kind of knowledge lifts a 1,100-ton monolith, raises it upright, and then transports it hundreds of kilometers against the Nile's current? Did you know that if this obelisk had been completed, it would still challenge many of our modern cranes? Yet, the ancient priests and engineers designed it as if such a feat was simply part of their toolkit. According to the stories, obelisks were frozen rays of the sun, anchors between worlds. Were these enormous stones just symbols, or were they also tests inside a hidden school of engineering and initiation? From the quarry, we move to the Great Pyramid. Deep inside, the so-called sarcophagus in the king's chamber is hewn from hard granite. its interior flat, square, and astonishingly true. The corners are sharp, the planes smooth, as though shaped by a language of measurement we only partially recognize. Around the pyramid, the original casing stones once met with such precision that a razor blade can barely find a gap. For thousands of years, wind and sand have tried to erase that accuracy, but the joints still cling together with tolerances closer to modern machining than to rough Bronze Age masonry. In other places, granite boxes gleam with mirror-like surfaces. Their interiors are so flat that light seems to slide along them. To achieve this, in one of the hardest stones on Earth, is not a casual achievement. It is a ritual of patience, force, and control. Most importantly, it leaves behind marks that do not behave like simple hammer blows. This is where the famous drill cores, studied by Flinders Petrie, enter the story. In some cores, spiral grooves wrap around the granite, suggesting a tool that bit into the stone with steady, rapid rotation. High-speed drilling, deep penetration per turn, in a material that eats copper for breakfast. Could sand and hand pressure alone leave such a signature at those implied speeds? Then we descend into the Serapeum of Saqqara. Rock-cut tunnels, heavy with silence, open into chambers that hold granite boxes weighing around 70 tons each. Their lids are massive, their interiors dark, their internal corners crisp and tight. Imagine finishing those internal surfaces underground, in cramped spaces, no room for giant, swinging tools, little margin for error. Taken together, these are not random curiosities. They feel like fingerprints of a technical language. Methods, tools, perhaps even vibrational techniques, channeling sound and resonance into stone. Old legends tell a different story about what the pharaohs and priests guarded here. Were these places only tombs and offerings, or were they also classrooms where initiates learned to make stone behave like metal? In the next chambers we visit, the pattern only grows stranger. Labyrinths, voids, and stones that wait. In the next chambers, the stone itself begins to keep secrets from us. High above the grand gallery of the Great Pyramid, where most visitors never look, modern detectors have pierced the rock. Muon tomography, using particles from cosmic rays, has drawn ghostly X-ray images through millions of tons of limestone. Did you know those scans revealed a long hidden void, roughly the size of a small cathedral, sealed above the gallery like a stone mirage? No corridors, no decorations, no obvious function. Engineers call it a big void. Archaeologists debate stress relief cavity, abandoned passage, construction gap. But what really happened, in a space deliberately placed, perfectly balanced, then completely sealed, imagine a dark, resonant chamber, floating in stone, never meant for ordinary feet. Was it an accidental leftover, or a silent witness to rituals no text dares describe? To search for answers, we have to go down, not up. Beneath the bright plateau of Giza lies a second, hidden city. Rock-cut passages dive under the causeways and temples, narrow tunnels that twist like veins through the bedrock. Some end in sudden chambers with smooth walls and empty niches. Others drop through vertical shafts, barely wide enough for a single body. These are not comfortable corridors for funeral traffic. They feel more like initiation mazes. The Osiris shaft, flooded and silent, descends in stages. First, a tight opening, then a deeper level with recesses. Then, finally, a chamber with a stone island surrounded by water. For thousands of years, the Nile has seeped around it, turning the descent into a literal journey into the underworld. According to the stories, this was linked to Osiris, lord of the afterlife. But standing there, we can also imagine blindfolded initiates, guided by priests, confronting darkness, cold, and the echo of their own breath. Far from Egypt, on a windswept hill in Lebanon, another puzzle waits in plain sight. At Baalbek, 3 colossal blocks, known as the Trilithon, sit in a high retaining wall. Each one is estimated at 800 to 1,000 tons heavier than the unfinished obelisk at Aswan, and yet they are fitted with uncanny precision. Later, Roman builders stacked their own, smaller stones above, as if respectfully building on a platform they did not fully understand. Who first moved these giants? With what kind of knowledge? And what tools? No modern crane could lift them easily on rough terrain, yet they rest there, aligned, as if placed by a hand that treated 1,000-ton stones like training weights. This is where a different pattern appears: labyrinthine tunnels under Giza, hidden voids inside pyramids, immovable blocks at Baalbek and Aswan, left half-freed from the bedrock. What if these were not just monuments, but stages, training grounds where mystery schools rehearsed fear, orientation, and, most importantly, control over the body's response to sound and movement? Imagine priests using chants in a sealed chamber to make walls hum, while an initiate lies in darkness, heart racing, learning to stay calm as vibration passes through bone and stone together. Imagine processions moving around the Trilithon, treating those massive inert blocks as the final exam in a curriculum that joined engineering with the afterlife. Are we looking at static ruins or at frozen scenes from a long discontinued practice? Old legends tell a different story, that these places were once living laboratories where stone, sound, and human consciousness were systematically combined. If that is true, then the next question is unavoidable. What were they trying to do to the human mind itself? We'll find out together when we step into the chambers that seem designed not for the dead, but for the living soul in training. Were the temples machines in disguise? To answer that, we have to do something strange. For a moment, forget the idea of a temple as a quiet, empty hall of stone. Imagine it instead as a tuned instrument, every wall a string, every column a tuning fork, every hidden chamber a resonant cavity where sound, geometry, and human breath lock together like parts of a machine. Did you know some of these buildings behave more like engineered systems than simple monuments? In the Great Pyramid, narrow shafts angle upward from the king's and queen's chambers, not wide enough for a person, but perfect for guiding air, sound, or even starlight. At Dendera, the stone ceilings and side chambers create powerful standing waves when a single chant is held. Granite rings with a sharp, bell-like tone. Limestone absorbs and softens. It is as if the priests chose each stone the way an instrument maker chooses wood. Most of us grew up believing these were just decorative choices. But what really happened if those choices were part of a precise design? Granite in the king's chamber, under enormous pressure, responds dramatically to low-frequency vibration. The sarcophagus there is slightly oversized for a body, but ideal as a resonant box. Old legends tell a different story, that initiates lay inside while chants, drums, and maybe even the heartbeat of the earth itself pulsed through the stone around them. This is where the idea of esoteric technology appears. Not lasers and metal machines, but a disciplined use of resonance, rhythm, and sacred geometry. The devices were the halls themselves, the human voice, the heartbeat, the breath. According to the stories, certain tones could calm fear, sharpen focus, or plunge an initiate into a trance where the boundaries of the body dissolved. Modern science now knows that specific frequencies can shift brainwaves. The Egyptians, for thousands of years, may have learned this the hard way, by direct experiment in stone. If sound can entrain the nervous system, what happens when it is amplified inside a chamber aligned to Orion or Sirius? What kind of knowledge hides in a corridor that channels not only air, but the rising of a particular star on a particular night? Some shafts in the Great Pyramid line up with known star paths, as if the sky itself was part of the circuit, timing rituals to cosmic rhythms. But these clues raise a deeper mystery. If temples and pyramids were instruments for transforming consciousness, why cloak them in myths of gods, underworld rivers, and judgment halls? Why describe a technical process as a journey through terrifying gates guarded by beings with knives of flame? Most importantly, why keep that operating manual secret, buried in symbol and ritual, guarded by pharaohs and priests? To answer that, we have to look beneath the stone and into the belief system that powered it. We have to step into the Egyptian map of death itself, the duat, and the terrifying precision with which they imagined the afterlife journey. The duat, Egypt's other world as operating system. To the Egyptians, death was not a quiet ending. It was a dangerous launch into a hidden system they called the duat, a vast underworld that worked less like a fairy tale and more like an operating manual for the soul. Did you know they believed every person would have to travel through this realm, not drift? Travel, the duat, was imagined as a sprawling landscape beneath and beyond the visible world, rivers of darkness instead of water, caverns where the air itself seemed to press in, and ceilings glittering with stars painted on black stone. Lakes burned with silent fire, serpents coiled around portals, their eyes like embers. Every step was a test. According to the stories, this was where the afterlife truly began. The soul had to move through a sequence of gates, each guarded by beings with knives of flame, lion-headed judges, or towering cobras. In some regions, boats slid along an ink-black current. In others, the traveler walked through halls lined with hieroglyphs that seemed almost alive, as if the very walls were whispering instructions. Above and within it all moved Ra, the sun god, sailing his bark through 12 hours of night, battling chaos so that dawn could return. Most of us grew up thinking of the afterlife as vague and distant, but old legends tell a different story. In Egypt, the duat was mapped with almost technical precision. Funerary texts like the Amduat and the Book of Gates divide the night into 12 distinct hours or regions. Each hour has its own terrain, its own gates, its own guardians, and most importantly, its own rules. Miss the rule, fail the challenge, and the soul could be trapped, cut apart, or simply erased. This was not just mythology, it was a rule-bound system. To pass a gate, the traveller had to know the guardian's secret name, speak exact spells, and perform precise gestures. One wrong word, and the gate stayed shut. One forgotten name, and a serpent struck. It reads less like a storybook and more like a cosmic security protocol, where language and symbol function as passwords that unlock the next level of the journey. At the climax of this passage waited the Hall of Ma'at. Here, under a ceiling painted with constellations, the heart of the dead was weighed against the feather of truth. If the heart was heavy with imbalance, a monstrous devourer waited below the scales. If it balanced, the gates beyond opened onto radiant fields. But what really happened with all this precision? What kind of knowledge were the pharaohs and priests encoding? Many researchers now suggest that temples and tombs were not random collections of chambers, but three-dimensional maps of the Duat itself. Long corridors mirror the soul's descent. Sudden shafts echo narrow gates. Hidden rooms resemble the secret chambers of the underworld texts. For thousands of years, initiates may have walked these paths in ritual darkness, rehearsing the invisible journey before death. Stone became a training ground, a living simulator for the Duat. And if the architecture was a map, could its hidden acoustics and alignments be the tools that actually powered this otherworldly operating system? In the next section, we'll find out together how these sacred spaces may have been tuned to guide consciousness through those same gates without ever leaving the body. 12 gates, 12 chambers, 12 lessons. If the temples were an operating system, then the Duat was the user manual, and hidden inside that manual was a curriculum. 12 gates, 12 chambers, 12 lessons. The Egyptians imagined the night not as empty darkness, but as a sequence. 12 hours, 12 regions. Did you know each hour of the night was its own environment, with its own guardian beings, rivers, caverns, and trials? The soul did not drift randomly. It moved, step by step, gate by gate, through a structured journey that demanded increasing levels of knowledge and inner strength. Texts like the Amduat lay this out with almost technical precision. They described the sun god Ra sailing in his boat through 12 underworld caverns, meeting coils of serpents, star goddesses, and fearsome guardians whose names had to be spoken exactly. These were not just stories to be told at bedtime. According to the stories, they were instructions. Each hour required passwords, gestures, and recognition of specific forms, like a cosmic exam that the soul had rehearsed for thousands of years while still in a body. Inside royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, those instructions became something even more powerful, a visual simulator. The walls are covered with scene after scene of the solar boat passing through these hidden regions. The guardians are drawn with precise crowns, staffs, and animal heads. Their names are written in tight bands of hieroglyphs. Priests and pharaohs did not simply read them. They walked past them, torchlight flickering, memorizing faces, poses, and sounds until the underworld felt as familiar as their own palace. Most importantly, this sequence in the texts seems to echo the sequence in stone. When we walk through a great Egyptian temple, we pass through a series of pylons and courtyards, then into hyperstyle halls crowded with columns, and finally into small dark sanctuaries at the core. The light narrows, the ceilings lower, the air grows still. Old legends tell a different story about this layout, but it was not just architecture, but a physical mirror of the 12 gates, a training maze where initiates practiced moving from the bright outer world into the concentrated mystery of the inner duat. And the stakes, at least in their belief system, were absolute. A mispronounced name, a forgotten spell. In the Amduat and related texts, the penalty is brutal. The unprepared soul can be cut to pieces by knives, devoured by serpents, or trapped in regions of suffocating darkness. This is why the knowledge stayed inside elite schools of priests and pharaohs, guarded by secrecy and rigid discipline. Precision was not optional. It was survival. But what really happened when those initiates trained? Imagine moving through long stone corridors in total darkness, fingertips on cold walls, chanting names that made the chambers vibrate. Imagine lifting and positioning heavy blocks in tight passageways, timing breath and sound so a whole team moved as one organism. What kind of knowledge were they engraving into their muscles, nerves, and bones? If the soul's journey required this level of exactness, is it possible the body itself was drilled to that same standard, using stone as the teacher? Were the rituals of moving through gates, aligning massive blocks, and speaking to resonant rooms actually one continuous practice, blending engineering with afterlife training? In the next part, we'll find out together whether this gate-by-gate curriculum might be the missing link between impossible stones and a lost technology of consciousness, rehearsing death in the halls of stone. If the pyramid was a textbook in stone, then the temples and tombs were the classroom. And here is the twist almost no one talks about. The pharaohs and priests did not wait to die before facing the duat. They rehearsed death while still breathing. Did you know that some underground chambers show almost no sign of daily use, yet perfect conditions for ritual drama? Imagine a pharaoh lowered into a stone box shaped like a sarcophagus, the lid sliding shut with a grinding echo. The air becomes heavy. Torches outside are extinguished. For hours, perhaps all night, he lies in engineered darkness, listening to chants rising and falling through the corridors like waves. These were not random ceremonies. They were simulations of the underworld journey. High priests led processions through pitch-black passageways, turning corners that mimicked the gates of the duat. Initiates walked blindfolded, one hand on the cool wall, the other on the shoulder ahead, guided only by a distant drumbeat or a single torch. Disorientation was not a side effect. It was the point. To train the soul to stay awake when the world goes dark. In this hidden curriculum, the sacred texts became more than decorations. The Book of the Dead, the Amduat, the Book of Gates. These were scripts. Old legends tell a different story than simple funerary art. According to the stories, initiates memorize long sequences of lines, names, and questions. In the silence before a carved doorway, a priest might stop and ask, "Who guards this gate?" The initiate had to answer with the guardian's secret name, spoken exactly, as if unlocking a living lock. Picture a sealed stone door deep under Saqqara. An initiate stands before it, heart racing, repeating a passage from the Book of Gates. The priest behind him waits, If the words falter, the door stays shut. If they are correct, hands push, a mechanism thuds, and the slab pivots or slides, revealing a darker chamber beyond. In that moment, language, architecture, and fear fuse into one technology. Sound itself became a tool. A group of priests gathers in a resonant hall, their voices tuned to a single note. They chant the Amduat, describing the sunboat passing through the 12 hours of night. The stone begins to hum, the vibration crawls up the spine. For thousands of years, these chambers have held that memory. Most importantly, moving stone was never just logistics, it was choreography. A ritual where a heavy lid is lifted from the Pharaoh's stone box at dawn becomes a symbolic rebirth. The moment the first ray of sunlight hits his face, drums strike and blocks are shifted along a prepared path, echoing the soul's passage through the Duat's gates. But what really happened when this choreography aligned with star cycles and precise acoustics? What kind of knowledge emerges when engineering, memory, and altered states are woven into one practice? In the next part, we'll find out together whether these death rehearsals hint at techniques that could bend not only consciousness, but stone itself. Precision as a sacred weapon, when every breath, every word, and every gesture might decide the fate of your soul. How careful do you become? In Egypt's mystery schools, precision was not a preference. It was a weapon. Across the Duat's 12 gates, we see the same pattern again and again. An initiate encounters a guardian or a deadly obstacle. They respond with the exact name, the correct formula, a specific posture or vibration. In return, they receive a reward, safe passage, new knowledge, or access to a deeper chamber of the afterlife. Did you know this sequence, encounter, response, reward, reads almost like a training manual hidden inside a myth? Now imagine that pattern not only in the invisible world, but carved into stone. According to the stories, each gate of the Duat was a different test. So what if each gate had its mirror in the temples and pyramids? An architectural space designed to embody that lesson. One chamber plunges you into total darkness. Another compresses you in a tight passage, pressing on fear of confinement. Another amplifies a single chant until it rattles your bones. The building itself becomes the examiner. The Egyptians were obsessed with getting things exactly right. A syllable mispronounced could doom a soul. A gesture made at the wrong moment could close a gate. That same obsession shows up in stone. Casing blocks on the Great Pyramid fitted so closely that a razor blade cannot slip between them. Temple floors at Karnak leveled to astonishing accuracy over huge distances. Most importantly, this is not just neat engineering. It looks like the outer face of an inner discipline. In the early stages, an initiate might only need to recite passages, walk in prescribed patterns, or match breath with a drumbeat in a small hidden chamber. But the difficulty escalates. Later, gates may have demanded group rituals where dozens of priests moved in perfect unison, or chants had to hit a precise pitch that made certain halls vibrate. Imagine timing a ceremony so a shaft in the pyramid catches a star at one exact moment, and missing it means waiting an entire year. Old legends tell a different story about the heaviest stones. They hint that the final courses in these schools were not written on papyrus at all. They were written in granite, moving an obelisk at Aswan, or aligning multi-ton blocks so tightly that time itself can barely find a crack, becomes the exam. Fail, and nothing moves. Pass, and the impossible shifts. But what really happened in those guarded workyards and sealed chambers? Were these just construction sites, or the last secret classrooms where stone itself was the gatekeeper? In the next part, we'll find out together how far this precision training might have gone, and whether the greatest initiation of all was learning to command the weight of the earth, when other mysteries whisper the same pattern. To answer that, we have to do something unexpected. We have to leave Egypt. Imagine the desert fading, and in its place, the hills of ancient Greece. For thousands of years, people walked a hidden road to a sanctuary called Eleusis. They entered at night, blindfolded or led in silence, and descended into underground chambers. There, in the Eleusinian mysteries, initiates faced a controlled plunge into darkness, guided by priests who promised one thing above all: a transformation so deep it would erase the fear of death. Did you know ancient writers said those who completed these rituals no longer dreaded the underworld? The initiates watched sacred dramas, heard secret words, and experienced sudden blasts of light in pitch-black halls. No one was allowed to reveal what truly happened inside. Oaths of silence guarded the rites, just as tightly as any sealed corridor at Saqqara or Giza. Old legends tell a different story about temples, not as public monuments, but as theatres of the soul. From there, the trail leads to Pythagoras and the Orphic schools. These were not just philosophical clubs. They were discipline schools where number, harmony, and proportion were treated as living powers. Imagine a room where strings are plucked, flutes are played, and initiates are taught that the same ratios tuning a lyre also tune the human spirit. The music of the spheres was more than poetry. According to the stories, it was a hidden language of the cosmos, a code that linked sound, geometry, and the journey of the soul after death. Now, pattern interrupt, shift again, leave the Mediterranean, stand before a stone circle in Britain, where legends say giants or magicians sang the stones into place, or walk the high Andean plateaus, where polygonal walls lock together so tightly that not even a knife blade can slip between them. In Peru and Bolivia, myths speak of gods who commanded stone as if it were clay, answering to whistles, chants, or divine instruction. Across these cultures, the same strange cluster appears: initiation, stone, and sound. Secret schools using architecture as a teaching tool. Dark passages, resonant halls, and rituals where the right word or vibration is said to open gates, whether those gates lead into the afterlife or into the very fabric of matter. What kind of knowledge makes a spoken formula feel like a lever on reality itself? Most importantly, this gives us a new lens on Egypt. Perhaps what we see on the Nile is not an isolated miracle, but the most fully preserved version of a wider ancient pattern, a civilization that turned its entire landscape into a training ground, where the same principles that moved souls through the Duat were rehearsed by moving impossible stones across the earth. But if that is true, how exactly did they apply this initiatory technology, and can we still read its traces in the stone today? Reading the sites as training grounds, not ruins. If the whole civilization was a training ground, then the great monuments stop looking like dead ruins and start to feel like classrooms. Did you know the Great Pyramid itself may read like a syllabus in stone? Not just a tomb, but a step-by-step journey that shaped the mind long before it received a body in the afterlife. Imagine entering the descending passage, that narrow, steep tunnel dropping deep into the bedrock. The ceiling presses low, the air grows heavy. For thousands of years, visitors have called it oppressive. But what if that pressure was the point, a first gate where initiates confronted fear, darkness, and the loss of ordinary orientation, rehearsing the moment when the soul first slips below the horizon of life? Then, the turn. The ascending passage breaks upward, tight and angled, forcing the body into a controlled climb. Every movement is deliberate. Every breath echoes. Above it opens the grand gallery, a sudden explosion of height and acoustics. Old legends tell a different story about this space, that chants could roll up those corbelled walls and ignite strange resonances. Picture priests placing initiates here, voices and drums tuned to specific tones, using sound as a hidden tool to push consciousness toward the edge. At the end waits the king's chamber, a stark granite room, tuned like an instrument. Modern tests have shown it rings at particular frequencies, the sarcophagus acting as a resonant core. But what really happened when an initiate lay inside, surrounded by chanting in the dark? What kind of knowledge were they receiving when vibration replaced daylight and stone itself seemed to hum? Now, shift to the Serapeum at Saqqara, a labyrinth of rock-cut corridors, each opening into a side chamber holding a colossal granite box. Officially, sarcophagi for sacred bulls, yet the interiors are polished to a mirror-like finish, the lids weighing dozens of tons. According to the stories, initiates may have entered these boxes alive. Total darkness, silence broken only by low, controlled tones rolling through the stone. Sensory deprivation combined with resonance, turning each box into a private gateway to altered states. Far to the south, the Aswan quarries tell another part of the curriculum. Here lies the unfinished obelisk, over 1,000 tons still fused to the bedrock. Tool marks surround it like notes in a manual. Imagine this quarry as a school where apprentices learned to listen to granite, to hear cracks before they formed, to walk rituals around a monolith before it was finally freed. And at Baalbek, those 800 to 1,000 ton platform stones become a final demonstration ground. Placing them was not just engineering. It was a proclamation, a ritual announcement that a lineage had mastered Earth's densest materials. So the next time we walk these sites, what if we enter not as tourists, but as prospective initiates? Every echo, every tight passage, every impossible block becomes a deliberate exercise. And most importantly, the question deepens. If moving stone was the final exam, what unseen forces were the real tools? If moving stone was the final exam, then the whole landscape becomes a classroom, a secret school written in granite and limestone, asking us a question. What kind of knowledge leaves a shadow you can still touch thousands of years later? We have walked a long path to get here, from impossible stones at Giza and Baalbek to the unfinished obelisk at Aswan, still clinging to the bedrock. from razor-thin joints in the Great Pyramid to spiral drill marks that look more like machine shop work than Bronze Age hammer blows. Then deeper, into hidden chambers, underworld texts, and the idea that temples themselves were machines for training consciousness. Along the way, two very different stories have stood side by side. On one side, ramps, sledges, rollers, and ingenious logistics, teams of workers hauling blocks with water-lubricated sand, levers biting into stone, and decades of organized labor. On the other, more esoteric visions, resonance fields, chanting priests, geometric layouts tuned to stars and frequencies, rituals that turned the entire Nile Valley into a living instrument. But what really happened? Did you know that in a strange way, both camps share a hidden core? Whether we imagine ropes and copper chisels, or sound and subtle energies, the ancients clearly treated matter, sound, and symbol as one continuous field. Words were not just labels. They were tools. The angle of a wall, the pitch of a chant, the color of a corridor, the star it pointed to, these were not decorations. They were controls on a spiritual machine. According to the stories, the priests trained to move not only stone, but attention. A name spoken at the wrong gate in the duat could cost a soul its journey. A gesture made out of rhythm could break a ritual. Precision was not optional. It was survival. Old legends tell a different story about these monuments, that every echo in a chamber, every carved symbol, every shaft of light at solstice was part of a curriculum. So what can the living learn from these dead engineers? Most importantly, that precision is a way of life. The Egyptians treated speech like architecture. A careless word was a cracked block in the foundation of reality. Imagine if we treated our messages, codes, and conversations with that same level of ritual care. How would our relationships, our technologies, even our own thoughts change? They also remind us that space is not neutral. A temple, a classroom, a bedroom, a subway station, each shapes consciousness in ways we rarely question. The mystery schools use darkness, narrow passages, resonant halls, and sudden bursts of light to sculpt inner states. Today, glowing screens, glass towers, and endless notifications do the same. But who designed the ritual we are all performing now? We'll find out together by turning their question back on ourselves. If they could turn stone into a library of transformation, what are we encoding into our data centers, our skyscrapers, our phones? Which hidden rituals are built into our social media feeds, our smart homes, our cities at night? And when some future civilization digs through our ruins, will they see a culture that knew what it was doing with its power, or a people who built unconscious temples to forces they barely understood? Standing at the gate of the next chamber. So, if our own cities might be unconscious temples, what does that say about those ancient ones that still stand, silent and precise, under the desert sky? As we leave this chamber, let the strongest images follow us like torches in the dark. Remember the 1,000 ton stones lying half-freed at Aswan or locked into the foundations at Baalbek, so massive that even modern cranes hesitate. Remember the torchlit corridors where priests and initiates walked in single file, breath echoing off limestone, reciting names of gates in the duat. Remember the 12 gates of that underworld, each one a test, each one a question. And remember the temples themselves, humming like vast stone instruments under the night, tuned to Orion, Sirius, and the slow heartbeat of the earth. Did you know some chambers ring at very specific notes, as if the walls were waiting to be played? Old legends tell a different story from simple tombs and burial halls. They hint at schools where pharaohs and priests learn to move not only through the afterlife, but through matter itself, using rhythm, focus, and sound as precisely as any machine. But what really happened when those voices rose in the dark? Perhaps the real lost technology of the pharaohs was never a single secret device hidden in a vault. Perhaps it was a way of training human beings themselves, nerves, breath, attention, to become exact, resonant instruments. Instruments that could work with stone and symbol at the same time, shifting blocks and beliefs together, aligning bodies, temples, and stars in one continuous ritual. Most importantly, this means the mystery is not only behind glass in a museum. It is also in the way we stand, listen, and speak inside these places. According to the stories, initiates did not visit a temple. They passed through it like a gate and came out different on the other side. That is what this episode has been. A gate. For thousands of years, people have argued about ramps and levers, aliens and miracles. But walking with these questions, through these images and possibilities, we have just completed a small initiation of our own. We are now better equipped to step into an ancient site or into a modern city and feel the hidden curriculum in the stone. If this feels like the first threshold, that is because it is. Ahead lie other chambers, deep dives into specific temples, experiments with resonance, forgotten texts that read like technical manuals for the soul. We'll find out together what kind of knowledge they were really guarding. Think of subscribing, commenting, and sharing not as casual clicks, but as joining a circle of modern initiates, keeping this school alive in the open instead of underground. So imagine one last scene. The camera pulls back from a lone figure standing before a massive stone in the desert night. No cranes, no machines, only breath, heartbeat, and the low wind. Above, the stars of Orion are just beginning to rise, the same pattern that watched over the builders and their mysteries. The figure reaches out, resting a hand on the cold surface, and a final question moves through the silence like a whisper. What else is still sleeping in the stone, waiting for someone who remembers how to ask it to move?